Do you know the Wachowski sisters? I know the Wachowski sisters. They're two transgender women who over the last 20 years have directed some of the most influential films that you have ever heard of. And in October of 2018, they announced that they were closing their Chicago-based production offices, and there were rumors that they were retiring from directing altogether. Of the 7 films that they've made, Bound, The Matrix sequels, Speed Racer, Jupiter Ascending, and Cloud Atlas, only one has really been an unqualified commercial and critical success. Their Netflix show Sense8, despite getting a lot of accolades and having a rabid fan base, was still one of the first on the platform to be canceled. So I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that they've had a bit of a rough decade. Now, news of their early retirement strikes me as something of a minor tragedy because I've been a fan of the Wachowskis for a pretty long time. I think that they make really interesting films. They're risky filmmakers. I don't think they're always necessarily the best, but I never forget a Wachowski film, and I've felt like it's high time to re-examine their work for a while. I've wanted to take a closer look at their films on this channel for a bit, but now, with the rumors of their retirement on people's minds, it seems like it's a good time to do it. So, in this video series, we're going to be looking at each of the Wachowskis' films individually to look at their strengths, but also their weaknesses as creators. Now, we're also going to be taking these through a series of 5 themes that I've picked out that I think are worth revisiting across these films. These are, of course, sexuality, philosophy, narrative or technological inventiveness, is definitely a metaphor for being transgender, and vor. Released in 1996, Bound is the story of Violet and Corky, who are 2 lesbians out to swindle Violet's awful, abusive husband. And his name, I guess, is Caesar. I'm just gonna call him Joey Pants, because Joe Pants is a much better name than Caesar. Sorry. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this film is basically perfect. It's got excellent set design, excellent costume design, all the performances are wonderful, the shots are really well composed and intentional. It's just a really good, really well done movie. And on top of that, it is aggressively sexy. I don't mean that as an idle threat. This film will kill you with how sexy it is. If you're watching this film on furniture that you really like, I'd suggest putting some towels down. Now, for as often as we talk about the first films of auteur directors in the 1990s, think Reservoir Dogs by Quentin Tarantino or Memento by Christopher Nolan, we never really talk about Bound, which I wonder why. I wonder what the common thread is between the violent, hyper-masculine films of these male directors and this overtly feminine lesbian film from 2 transgender women. It's probably just because it's bad. First films from a director tend to have this very specific quality to them where they are very clearly a passion project that creator has been workshopping in their brain for years, perhaps decades. So by the time they make it, they have a razor sharp vision of exactly what they want. So this is why when you look at Bound and you compare it to, say, Jupiter Ascending that comes much later, there's a pretty big difference in terms of how it seems that the Wachowskis relate to the material. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not knocking Jupiter Ascending. We'll get there. But it does strike me as odd that a film like Bound that is just as postmodern and technologically experimental as Pulp Fiction and Memento doesn't get talked of in the same breath. It's got a non-linear story, it uses technology in innovative ways, and it's generally like a neo-noir pastiche. In fact, I might even rank Bound above a lot of those 90 auteur premiere films because for as narratively and technologically inventive as they may have been for the time, they still ultimately reinforced a lot of harmful narrative tropes. Bound doesn't do that. Bound is still revolutionary today, at a time when film producers won't even let Captain Marvel kiss the person who is very clearly the girl with whom she's raising a daughter. The Wachowskis had a full-on wild-ass sex scene between 2 adult grown women. And the best part of that movie is, spoilers, I'm talking about the movie, so there's gonna be spoilers. Don't complain in the fucking comments about there being spoilers on this video about a movie. I'm gonna talk about the movie. Spoilers, they don't die at the end. They actually get together, they run away together, they succeed with the grift, and they drive off in the biggest, reddest, lesbianist truck ever put to film. And it is good and happy and nice, and sometimes you just want your lesbians to stay alive and be happy together. Is that really so much to ask, Hollywood? So philosophically, this is a film about toxic masculinity. There's a really good early scene where Corky and Violet are flirting on the couch, and Joey Pants walks in and freaks out, all the way up until he realizes that Corky is a girl.
What the fuck is this? What the fuck is... Oh.
This scene speaks to a lot of the themes of the film overall. It touches on compulsory heteronormativity, where Joey Pants assumes that everybody is straight until proven otherwise. So his masculinity is threatened by the idea of his wife sitting with another person who is interested in her sexually. But when he sees that it's a girl, he just assumes, oh, everybody in the room is straight, so they're just doing girl things. They're not flirting or getting ready to have really, really intense sex. Obviously. I mean, look at Joey Pants, right? He is this well-cut man guy who very handsome. And then you compare that to Corky, who is this girl who, I mean, she has these lips and her hands. And, oh, Gina Gershon, you could fix my pipes any day. Right, sexuality, check. Now what makes this film stand out from the pack for me is precisely that its protagonists are ontologically non-threatening. You get this scene in a lot of mobster films where all of these men are in a room crowded around a briefcase full of money, and you'll see in the background somebody's wife carrying around a bottle of bourbon, just sort of tipping into glasses, filling them up, and you never really know who that person is. But Bound is explicitly that woman's story, and her invisibility in the realm of men is precisely what makes her so powerful. It's her advantage, because she and Corky are able to come up with a plan that they can execute beneath everybody's noses. Nobody suspects them because she's the hot wife who's just sort of there with her husband, Joey Pants, because she's vain and shallow and she likes having money, and therefore that's all that she's there for. Therefore, that's all that she's there for. And I think this perspective also shows us just how silly this sort of frail masculine violence can be, because it's very clearly a weakness. It's insecurity. And I think the film generally, the Wachowskis have said that this is a film about boxes, about the boxes that we put ourselves into, and how masculinity and patriarchal expectations generally are bad for everybody. They create situations where men and women have to limit the ways that they are allowed to conceptualize themselves, such that men are only able to express their feelings through violence. So that's maybe not super great, and this film takes that on in some really interesting ways, just by virtue of putting us from the perspective of a pair of women. You keep waiting for Violet to betray Corky because you're expecting this femme fatale stereotype, but she doesn't do that. And that's wonderful, because she knows the expectation of her as the femme fatale, and she uses that to her advantage against all the other dudes, but she still cares about Corky. She actually cares. She cares! How good is it to have a movie where two women actually care about each other and aren't fucking each other over and do fuck, and it's good? How often? Not very. Not in mainstream Hollywood. Fun fact for all you amateur filmmakers out there, not everybody has to die, and not every film has to center on the discovery of a woman's corpse. Just throwing that out there. generally. I know they say write what you know, but I would like to think that it's a little bit easier to imagine a marginally healthy relationship as opposed to the philosophical ramifications of a murder. Oops, time for an estrogen break. Hold on just a second. Gotta get my girl on. Now, one thing you would expect from looking at the directors of The Matrix is that as their second film, The Matrix would be their big, technological experimental renaissance. But going back to Bound, it's actually kind of surprising how many really experimental and groundbreaking flourishes there really are. I mean, you've got this shot craning down into a closet with this giant pull cord in the foreground, or you have this shot coming out of the barrel of a gun while whiskey fills this glass. Now, that shot seems like the kind of thing that we would take for granted today, but it's easy to forget that these are all done practically, which is kind of astounding to me. Even in the title sequence, which looks pretty unremarkable by today's standards, that was done live. They made the logo of the film out of giant painted foam letters, and then they programmed a camera to move around it and lights to move in sync with it so that it created the correct appearance. And then you have the marquee sex scene, which is done in one shot. And they did this because they wanted to make sure that producer Dino De Laurentiis couldn't take it overseas and then hire a bunch of adult film actresses to film explicit porn sequences they could then cut in to sell it as a porn film. This shot is an astounding piece of work, not just because it manages to foreground the bodily pleasure of these two women as opposed to the spectacle of their bodies, or just because the motion is fluid and powerful and sends a really interesting creative message. Technologically, this shot required that they be able to move the walls of this set in time with the camera's motion. That level of choreography is very hard to pull off, and it's kind of amazing to see them be this ambitious with their stuff, have such a clear idea of exactly the image that they wanted to make and exactly why they needed to make it that way, and knew how to do it and did it. So it's not just that the ambition is there from the beginning, it's that the ability and the talent to actually do something with it is there from the very beginning. And that's kind of astounding to me. And now for the last point, transness. Is it okay to analyze the films of two trans women from the lens of being trans that they made long before they came out and started transitioning? I don't know, but I'm gonna do it anyway because I don't know if you noticed or guessed from the way that I'm dressed or the fact that I literally took estrogen and spironolactone in this video. I'm a trans woman, so I'm sort of naturally inclined to be biased and read a little too much into things. So we're going to do that anyway. So what's interesting about Violet is that she's a woman who we have no indication that she's ever expressed her desire for women at any point prior to this. That's sort of left to the imagination, whether this is a recent development. She's confident enough that it seems like this is not her first dalliance, but the fact remains that she's constrained by this heteronormative relationship that she's in. And the film is ultimately her attempt to get out of that relationship and permanently away from it and embrace her sexuality. But I find this final exchange between Violet and Corky really interesting.
You know what the difference is between you and me, Violet?
No.
Me neither.
Violet undergoes a literal transformation in this film from a closeted lesbian at the beginning to a out lesbian at the end, thus resulting in her not being different from Corky. But it's very easy to take a broader read of that same exchange as the transformation of someone who is constrained by a heteronormative, cis-normative society to becoming who they are sexually and in gender expression, since she's also changing her gender expression from less overtly feminine to being more sort of down to earth and street level clothes the way that Corky wears. I can't say with without any doubt that the Wachowskis had this in mind when they were writing or making this film, and ultimately it doesn't really matter because we're not talking about intentionality. We're just talking about meaning that we can read into the text. And I think it's pretty easy to read like a transgender subtext to this as a desire to break free from the normative expectations that you've been raised under that not only constrain your ability to express yourself, but constrain your ability to exist happily among other people and ultimately result in violence done upon you, which the world thinks you deserve. And the film ultimately ends when they've killed the perpetrator of this violence and stolen his money and drive off together in the biggest, reddest, butchest lesbian truck ever put to film. It's gorgeous and I love it. And I want to ride in the back and just sing songs. Now that connection, that like transgender read, I just want to be clear. I did come up with this on my own, but in researching for this video, I watched the special features, and there is a theorist in one of the featurettes who basically makes the same read. So I just want to be clear that I'm not like passing off their observation as my own. It's just a weird coincidence that I'm just owning up to right now. So don't at me, okay? And that's Bound. It's a good movie. You should go watch it. Do not forget the towels. I'm telling you. Yeah, that's it. So in the next video, we're going to look at The Matrix and probably talk a little bit more about transness because it's a bit less subtextual in that particular film. So get ready. Special thanks to my $10 a month patrons: Shay, Z, Weibo, Mix B, Brian Geffrich, Marcus Kitzinger, Swooshy Cube, Momo Balky, Scott Olson, J-Mac D, Cokernell, Logan McQuiston, Austin McCauley, Get Dunked In, Mila Kwan, Agent JR, Hello Burbello, you stinky burb, go eat a seed ugly, Anonymous Benefactor, Justin Cruck, The Mornhammer, Kill All Landlords, Amy Mims, Natalie Pollard, Nick Hansen, Violet Viscara, Not Sam, Avery J, Bianca Gonzalez, Varisha Juris, M. Lee, Iris Fox, Seneki, Set, Cayenne Shepherd, Jeffrey Gralloway, Anarcho Duck, Jennifer Palmer, and Richard Daly. Hey, thanks for watching this video, eh? So this is a bit of a shorter one compared to the ones I've been doing forever, and that's because I want to be able to release more content and a more consistent schedule. So I'm doing this as like one film that I can just talk about relatively short period of time and churn these videos out a little bit faster in between the longer ones. So hopefully that's acceptable. Hopefully this video wasn't garbage. I went without the teleprompter for the first time in a while, so we'll see how that works. That's a problem for future me, who is past me now to you, who is double future you. Time is bullshit. If you like what I do and you want to support me in making more, why don't go to patreon.com/LTAS and give me some money. For as little as $5 a month, you get access to my notes and scripts and various unused materials. All patrons get access to a exclusive video essay that's 30 minutes long, and $10 a month patrons get their names read aloud in the credits. I also have a podcast, the Trans Questioning Podcast, which I co-host with my friend May Leitz, and there's other places where you can find me, like on Twitter at HMSNoFun, and in other places. I guess those are just the places. That's it. Those are the places. So thanks again for watching, and stay dry. That's a bad joke.